we're losing the battle to cardiovascular health. Cardiovascular disease is the number one killer in America, although cancer is coming up very rapidly there, and they're not sure whether it's going to overtake as the number one killer in the US. That's the data that I've looked at. We've got significant problems in terms of 88% of Americans have one disease or condition, part of the metabolic syndrome. There's only 12% that don't have one of those metabolic diseases. If we look at sort of the 1800s and people not suffering with so many cardiovascular events, what in our lifestyles has given us sort of the inability to react to these stresses, or what has changed that we don't deal with emotional trauma like we used to, because it seems like disease is more prevalent, chronic disease, than it was previously?
Great. So very, very good question, Steve. So let's break it down. Okay. So let's talk about diet first, because we're going to talk about two big areas in our life, which is nutrition and then emotional trauma, and then how does that make us unwell. So let's look at nutrition first. So if you look after World War II, all forms of chronic disease just go up in a line like that exponentially. Okay, and there's a few things that changed in terms of our food. So the first thing is we started consuming far too much sugar. All right. So the average human prior to World War II consumed roughly 2 kilograms of sugar per year, mainly in the form of honey. Okay. The average human today on a Western diet consumes 60 to 80 kilograms of sugar. All right. And sugar is toxic to our body. Right. So that's way too much sugar. The second thing is that we are consuming nutritionally deficient fruit and vegetables. There's not enough micronutrients in the fruit and the vegetables that we consume because we've overfarmed the soil. The fruit and vegetables are picked green and put into cold storage and artificially ripened. So you may be eating an apple that's got 0% value for your body. So you need to eat 17 apples today to get the same nutritional value compared to an apple maybe from 30 years ago, right? So people are eating healthier, but we're literally starving in the face of plenty, okay? So that's the second point. The third point around nutrition is that we have moved away from eating an omega-3 rich fat diet to an omega-6 rich fat diet. And omega-6 comes from seeds and nuts and cereals and vegetable oils. So the vast majority of people are consuming grain-fed animal protein, right? So remember the saying goes, you are what you eat. So if the cow grows up in a feedlot and consumes the grain, which is omega-6, and you eat the cow, you become the cow. You become the grain, okay? So the omega-6 is pro-inflammatory, pushes up our cholesterol, and changes the nature of the cholesterol to a more oxidized or a form that's more likely to cause harm in our body. So too much omega-6, too little omega-3, highly refined sugar and starches, too much of that in our diet, and fruit and vegetables that are deficient in micronutrients. So those are the three big categories in terms of food and nutrition that's making us unwell.
Okay, let's stop it there. And the person who's listening to this says, oh my goodness, I'm eating an apple. I need 17 apples compared to 30 or 40 years ago. I think the stat was 42 apples you need compared to 1905. There was some stat that was going around there. Way too much omega-6s, and in our other practices, looking at that ratio, now you can test that ratio quite easily. Numbers have been 30 to 1, 40 to 1, 60 to 1. I've even seen 80 to 1 of omega-6s to omega-3s. And then the last thing is, you said nutrient deficient.
Micronutrient deficient.
Yes, and then omega-6s to omega-3s, and then the last.
Too much sugar.
Too much sugar. So someone's listening, what do they do?
Well, again, look, for me, if you really want to look at the way we should be eating, because there is no diet that fits everybody's profile.
Absolutely.
Okay? It doesn't work.
It doesn't exist.
That's why no diet has absolutely worked. Okay. So for me, the first thing is you want to eat like your grandparents ate. You must eat the traditional foods that your grandparents and great-grandparents ate. So when the Japanese moved to Hawaii, they got the American diseases. In the South African setting, I can remember that when I was training as a cardiologist, and even when I was a student, if I had to tell my prof that I diagnosed a heart attack in a black South African patient, I would have been kicked out of medical school because we never saw it. Yet if you go into the cardiac ICUs now, in a lot of the public sector hospitals, you'll see many young patients with heart attacks. It's commonplace. Okay, so when you move away from a traditional diet, because I believe that what we eat and what we consume also has a positive or a negative effect on those little light switches in our DNA over hundreds of years. Okay, so we got used to eating a very traditional diet from, based on our cultural backgrounds, and now we change it, and that can create the problem. So eat your traditional foods, number one. Eat home cooked meals. Stay away from consuming all the fast foods. Now, always ask, what is the source of animal protein that you're consuming? Is this commercial protein, commercially available protein, or is this as natural a source of animal protein that I'm consuming? What on my plate is going to elevate my sugar levels in my blood? Okay, so, and what is the source of fat that I'm using to cook my meal, or the oil or the fat within the animal protein? So those are the basic questions that you want to ask. So go green as much as possible, right? Eat as many vegetables and greens as much as possible. Limit the amount of animal protein to less than 5 to 10% of your total diet, but eat a better quality of animal protein. So omega-3 rich fat. So this is, it's very interesting, because this is why when you eat venison, your cholesterol goes down, but you eat beef and your cholesterol goes up. They're both herbivores, right? So the wild animal is consuming leaves and grass and so on, whereas the cow's eating grain when it should be eating grass. Okay, and there's a prime example. Okay, so the other anomaly around it is, if you look at who's got the highest cholesterol levels in the world, it's not the Indians or the Afrikaners, it's the Eskimos, the traditional Eskimos, because they ate a lot of wild fat and seal meat. Yet with the highest cholesterol level in the world, they also had one of the lowest heart attack rates in the world. And that's because they were consuming large amounts of omega-3 rich fat and not omega-6 rich fat. Okay, so go green, limit the amount of animal protein, but eat a better quality of animal protein. Limit the amount of refined sugar and starch in your diet. Okay, stay away from the sugars, because it's fat never makes you gain weight. It's the refined sugar and starch. Okay, and then perhaps in today's world, you want to look at supplementing your micronutrients, because you're not going to get enough in your food. No matter how well you try, and it's expensive, it's difficult to get organic food, we're going to have to supplement what is missing, right? So for me, when you look at things like multivitamins, you can never ever get what your body needs into one little capsule a day. That's a lie. It's not going to work. Okay. So for me, it's understanding that you want to be able to get all your B vitamins. You want to look at a source of vitamin C, vitamin D, zinc, and so on. So looking at how do you get that from external sources today, because there's not enough in the food. Okay. So that's my sort of simple approach to eating.